A neo-Nazi group is gathering in Texas, having carefully vetted attendees to make sure footage like this doesn't exist. Except they weren't expecting Kristofer Goldsmith. He served in the Iraq War and today has made it his mission to expose hate in America.
This is the Nazi hunting station.
Goldsmith shows us how he infiltrates white supremacist and neo-Nazi groups from his office.
When I see a swastika on the ground made of firewood that they can burn, I now know this is where the neo-Nazi conference is going on.
To get intelligence about this October meeting of the Aryan Freedom Network, he went undercover.
After you study these people for years, I can talk like them, so I can convince them that I am one of them, right? So they'll let me into their private chats, whether that's on Telegram or, some other fringe app.
And it was via Telegram last July that Goldsmith learned of the event the group was trying to keep a secret.
Law enforcement, because of the First Amendment, cannot infiltrate a neo-Nazi organization the way that I do.
In October, someone with the alias Daisy Barr, a reference to the leader of the women's KKK chapter a century ago, told him to be ready to be vetted by video chat.
What kind of questions did they ask?
Their vetting for me to infiltrate the Aryan Freedom Network was just confirming that I was white. Hey, can you see me? I showed them on video wearing a skull mask, which is popular with the neo-Nazis. They saw blue eyes and white around my face, and they said, all right, you're in.
A few days later, he got another message to meet up at a gas station in a remote town in East Texas.
This right here was the meeting spot.
His team followed the convoy from the gas station to the rural home where members of the Aryan Freedom Network were gathered. They flew a drone the whole way.
Rather than put a human being at risk, we send this out to go spot the neo-Nazis.
Using the drone footage, he notes the make, model, and license plates of vehicles in hopes his information will help connect the dots between individuals and hate groups.
What would you say are your ultimate goals for your efforts here?
Our ultimate goals are to make being a neo-Nazi very uncomfortable and expensive.
An AFN member initially sued Goldsmith for flying the drone over private property, but dropped it with the option to refile.
You've also talked about how you aren't concerned about harassing people, some of these groups, as part of your methods. And some people might argue that's inappropriate. What do you say to that?
Task Force Butler does not harass or dox people. We simply do not do that. What we do is we take away a veil of secrecy that is being used to hurt people.
The United States is experiencing historic levels of extremist incidents around the country, propelling Goldsmith's drive. He grew up on Long Island with a dream of serving his country, realizing it right after high school with a deployment to Iraq.
When you came back, how were you changed by that experience?
I had severe post-traumatic stress disorder in Iraq.
That PTSD led to a dark period in his life, including an attempt at taking his own life the night before his second deployment to Iraq. Missing his flight resulted in a less than honorable discharge from the Army in 2007. Since then, he's been advocating for veterans' rights on Capitol Hill, the very site where on January 6, 2021, some members of the veteran community were among those who stormed the building. He watched, outraged, but says he wasn't surprised.
Veterans aren't innately drawn to these extremist organizations, but these extremist organizations know how to manipulate veterans. They know how to identify veterans who are vulnerable, like I was, and they fill these questions that we have with conspiracy theories as answers.
So he founded Task Force Butler to employ other veterans to help him fight extremism. His team members stay undercover while he goes public with information they gather.
Veterans carry social capital in a way that other folks don't. Those who are targeting us with those messages are more likely not just to, when they get us, not just the one of us, not just the one veteran, but a social network.
Goldsmith has focused much of his work on the Patriot Front, a group that was responsible for disseminating more than 82% of the almost 5,000 white supremacist propaganda messages spread across the country in 2021, according to the Anti-Defamation League. Last June, 31 members of the group were arrested, who authorities say were planning to riot at a pride parade in Idaho.
I've got access to their Rocket Chat server, which is like an open source version of Slack. And I'm able to see from the inside. We know that our research has been used to help support at least one lawsuit.
That lawsuit, filed against members of the Patriot Front who were filmed allegedly vandalizing an Arthur Ashe mural with spray paint in Virginia. The two men were served in November and have not responded to the complaint. They did not respond to requests for comment from NBC News.
You know, the thought of infiltrating a group that seems really scary and potentially dangerous. That
is not scary compared to getting in a up-armored Humvee and driving through Baghdad every day for a year.
Good boys.
For Goldsmith and his Task Force Butler team, a new mission here at home, and they say still in service to their country.
All right, Courtney Kube joins us now from the Pentagon. And Courtney, of course, as we just heard before you there from Peter, today is the second anniversary of the attack on the U.S. Capitol. Kristofer told you he found Task Force Butler. He founded it after watching the events unfold on that day. And there is sort of a military aspect to this. Do we know how many U.S. military veterans or current service members have been charged for their actions on January 6th?
Yeah, that's right. He said he watched that day and he was outraged knowing that there were probably military veterans there. So the George Washington University has this program on extremism that tracks meticulously everyone who has been charged for some role on January 6th. And of the 940 defendants they have on their database, about 118 people have some sort of a military background. The vast majority of those are people with former military service. So most of those would be veterans. But you can see that's still a relatively large proportion of that 940 total people. And those are the exact people who the Task Force Butler people are trying to target with their efforts here, trying to teach that, trying to expose them and teach them to change their ways.
Yeah, more than 10%. Do we know what's next for Goldsmith and Task Force Butler?
He says that they are not stopping, that they're going to continue their efforts there, and they're actually hoping that they can even expand their veteran and volunteer network in the future.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.